you ever enjoyed a 5x5 so much that you want to re-experience the whole thing on 4x4? While it's true that Moi made some pretty crazy even cubes that sometimes are even better than their own odd cubes, the reality is that even cubes are fundamentally an odd cube with a hidden middle layer, and therefore they have some space constraints because it's pretty awkward when you design your 4x4 to be the same size as your 5x5, and therefore you need to scale things down. And you also need to have an extra alignment mechanism to prevent the layer of hidden pieces from coming out of alignment and jamming your puzzle. Enter the Diansheng 2 shell 5x5. Not a full copy, but a damaged one with some missing caps and magnets that my friend gave me for the sake of experimentation. You might have seen me repurpose most of the remaining caps to make the Life 453M, but now I present to you the opposite experiment, built from the mechanism of the Diansheng 5x5 but with 3D printed caps. First, I cut off the heads of all the pieces belonging to the middle layer. Then I trimmed the second layer to make room for a bigger outer layer. And then I added these pieces under the screw with the same quarter circle with the XP alignment mechanism, and also a set of washers. Finally, I created a new set of caps to glue on top of the cube. The Diansheng 2 shell 5x5 normally measures 60.8mm across, but with all the caps removed, the remaining mechanism is 58.5, and I really wanted to seize this opportunity to make the cube smaller than 60mm, giving as little vertical thickness as possible to the new caps and relying on horizontal thickness for more strength. In theory, this should make a 59.5mm 4x4, but due to imperfect gluing of the pieces, it still came out to be 60mm. Given that the name of the base 5x5 isn't officially announced, I don't know exactly what to call this 4x4, but for now I'm just going to call it the Diansheng Live 460. This puzzle is a very fast cube, in line with the original 5x5 it is built from. Turning is less smooth due to grinding of the 3D printed caps, and I also feel that the modded process added more weight to the cube than it took away, leading to a slightly heavier and clunkier feel. The forward corner cutting isn't as big as top of the line speed cubes in absolute amounts, but it's definitely sufficient in most cases. This is actually true for both the base 5x5 and the 4x4 that it got modded into. The reverse corner cutting is pretty insane, going up to almost a full piece on the 1x1 cuts and 3/4 of a piece in the 1x2 cuts. This easily beats the base 5x5 and to some degree even beats my Aosu WRM on its current setting. It's likely due to how big I designed the holes and the outer caps, along with its arc-shaped edges that resemble the Gun 460, and I also partially Florian modded the X centers of the base 5x5. The magnets are moderately strong on both the inners and the outers, although the bore core is more noticeable on the outers, and spamming algorithms also work for the most part. However, one annoying thing is that the alignment mechanism fails quite often, sometimes multiple times per solve, and in an effort to keep the size of the cube down, I actually made the ring area quite shallow, which gives insufficient height for the XB alignment mechanism to reliably latch onto the X. While it doesn't take that much time to realign the cube, and the mechanism still works more than 50% of the time, quite unacceptable since the standard here should really be 100%. So here is a look at the mechanism of the 4x4. Let's just take a look at it piece by piece. First, this internal midge and this, which is the X center. Obviously these are 5x5 pieces with the head cut off. So I really took a pair of pliers and chopped off part of the 5x5 piece, and this is what's left. They more or less look identical to normal 4x4 internal pieces, except for the foot of this thing. This is still as thin as a screw. Normally a 4x4 midge would be a little bit thicker at this point. This one looks a lot like an Aosu, except maybe the hole here is missing, so you can kind of tell that the actual piece itself, like the original piece and the cap that I glue on top, are in slightly different locations. Okay, the wing looks almost identical to that of an Aosu. Here's a piece of Aosu. So actually 6 of the 7 Aosus all feature this wing here that is has the characteristic Weilong feature at the back. The only version of the Aosu that doesn't do this is the GTS1. I kind of featured it not because it was my intention, but because this cube was originally a 5x5, so the first layer actually sticks out by about as far as a 5x5 would be. Like, to increase the outer layer size back to that of a normal 4x4, I had to push the cut line in this way. So I tried to preserve as much of the 5x5 as I could, and then at the highest point here I cut it off. So this sort of accidentally created the Aosu and like Weilong wing feature. And of course the corner piece, I think this is the coolest looking piece of the bunch. The head really looks like it came out of one of the newer Moi 3x3, and then the entire root looks like it's from a 5x5. Because it is. The original 5x5 has a very close distance bore core. You can see from here at the back how close the core magnets are to the core. The magnet layout of this cube is slightly unusual, and it's actually a concept that I recycled from making the Maglev 4x4 V2. The inner layer has two magnets to get around the polarity issue, as usual. In theory means double strength, and the outers under normal conditions would have stronger magnets, but in this cube, however, I still use the same strength magnets, but the corner is press fit. So between the corner and this outer magnet here, there's only one wall. So the magnets are closer compared to the two pairs of the middle layers, which are separated by two walls and they're further away. So these end up becoming two weaker attractions, whereas this one and this one is one stronger attraction. And they sort of balance out with each other well enough such that I actually do not need to use a stronger magnet on the outer too. And it's indeed a Stalkless center line. And just for comparison, the Maglev 4x4s that I made in 2022 and 2024 also were Stalkless, but they were done in a totally different way with my own alignment mechanism. It's quite an impossibility with the XB alignment mechanism where you need this top part to lock to the core, but in this case what I did was I designed this black piece here with the bump from the XB alignment mechanism, and I just glued it straight to the screw. That's to prevent the top from turning. To prevent the bottom from turning, I have to glue the screw to the core.
But Sandy, doesn't that mean we can't adjust the screws? Excuse me, my friend. Do you know who gave up the infinite tension options of a screw for the finite number of preset options? That's Mo Yi with the Weilong V10, Qi Yi with multiple different tornadoes, Gan with pretty much all their cubes since a long time ago, Da Yan with the newer Gu Hongs and Zhan Sis that look nothing like the originals, and also most startup brands when they make their first 3x3s. And this can potentially get really, really broken if any one of these guys make a smaller version of their tension system with 3 options instead of 8 and stick the XB alignment mechanism on top. They can pretty much...
Overall, the puzzle is quite fun to play with, and it looks very aesthetically pleasing. It also beats most of my experimental cubes, mostly due to the fact that it is an injection molded mechanism with 3D printed caps, rather than being fully 3D printed. However, the cube itself is not something I would use to compete in the WCA setting, especially with a small cube like 4x4, wasting 1 to 2 seconds on hardware mishaps such as layer misalignments is 1 to 2 seconds too much. However, if Diansheng could actually redesign the exact same mechanism but as single pieces rather than artificial caps glued over a cube, I don't think it's that difficult for them to slightly alter the dimensions just to be a little bit smaller and then add a Weilong V10 style core to replace the glued down screws that I use here. Potentially make a decent 59mm 4x4 without the alignment issue.